I'm Susan Yost-Filkate, and I'm the education director and also sort of the Zoom master at the museum, it turns out. So I am pleased to welcome everyone here for Anne Scheid's studio tour. We're very excited to have her and to have all of you join us. I just wanted to go over a couple of things. We are recording this session. I also ask that if everyone can mute, unless you need to speak, and there will be opportunities at the end to ask questions. Uh, we will, let me see, we will be accepting questions through the chat, or you can actually ask them at the end. I have a few that were submitted to us by email, which I will be reading when we're at the conclusion of this. And I think I'm going to turn the camera and the mic over to Sarah Vargas, who is our curator and who has been working very closely with Anne on this Zoom meeting. So Sarah, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Susan mentioned, my name is Sarah Vargas, and I'm the curator at the Fresno Art Museum. And I curated the exhibition Here She Stands, Women Artists from the Permanent Collection, where an example of Anne's work is included in the show. So currently we are still closed to the public, but once we reopen, which hopefully will be very soon, you will be able to see her work in person. So I'm going to give a little background on the exhibition itself before we turn it over to Anne. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that. So I have a video to share with you. For those of you who may have joined us for the Margaret Lazari studio tour, this initial information will be familiar, but I felt it was important for anyone that was joining us for the first time. So this is a walkthrough of Here She Stands in its entirety. It is located in the Fig Garden, Duncan, and Hallowell galleries at the museum. The works selected for Here She Stands reflect the diversity, depth, and creative vision of the women artists who are included in the museum's permanent collection. There are 36 women represented in this exhibition, but be assured there are many, many more in the collection itself. We have a variety of mediums represented here, including textile works, sculpture, clay work, basketry, painting, printmaking, and of course, drawing. Some of these artists are world-renowned, like the Helen Lundeberg piece that you're seeing. Some of them are best known in the local community. And when selecting these works, I knew I wanted to show some pieces that we kind of consider showstoppers that have been exhibited in the past, but I also made sure to select pieces that, as far as I know, have never been exhibited since they entered the museum's collection. So this is an exhibition about women artists, and that is very prominent in the narrative. However, it is important to note that not all of these artists considered themselves feminists or viewed their work as political. They did, however, have the shared experience of being female in a largely male-dominated sphere. A 2019 study of diversity in the arts found that even the largest and most progressive museums in the world claim only about 12.6% of their collections as being work by women artists. That means 84.7% of artists in museum collections are male. The same study found that only 11% of museum acquisitions by 26 prominent US museums and 14% of exhibitions, all exhibitions over the last decade, have been work by women. That is an extremely low percentage, considering that women make up just about half of all working artists and account for 70% of both BFA and MFA degrees. Currently, women make up just 2% of the global art market, accounting for only $4 billion of the $196.6 billion spent at art auctions between 2008 and May 2019. Right now, we are looking at Anne Scheid's drawing, The Ancient, which is part of the Witness series. It's one of the largest pieces we have in this exhibition. and it is one of 11 works by Anne that the museum currently has in its collection. And Anne will be discussing that work further during her talk, so I will let her go into detail about it. But the Fresno Art Museum has long been dedicated to the promotion of women artists. The first work by a woman artist in the museum's permanent collection was Jean Ray Laurie's Tiger Garden, a textile piece that was collected in 1963, just after the museum first began building its permanent collection. Judy Chicago brought attention to women artists when she launched the first feminist art program in the nation at California State University, Fresno in 1970, influencing many of the local women artists who have graced our galleries. And the Fresno Art Museum was the first museum in the United States to devote a full 12 months of exhibitions in 1986 and 87 solely to women artists. This would lead to the launch of the Council of 100 Distinguished Woman Artist Award and exhibition program. That program celebrates the work of women artists who have established their careers and made their mark on the art world. Now, because of constraints due to the pandemic, we have been unable to host that program in both 2020 and this year, but we are very excited that it will come back in 2022. And Anne, besides being an amazing artist, is also an advocate for other artists. She is actually a member of the Council of 100 and is the chair of the selection committee. So Anne has personally helped bring several of the other women represented in this show to the museum. And she's an active member of Fig Tree Gallery here in Fresno. So we have concluded the walkthrough of Here She Stands. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you get a chance to see it in person once we reopen. So this is a picture I wanted to share with you. I thought it was very fun. That is the Ancient. Again, this is from a 2005 exhibition that was at the Fresno Art Museum. And I'm not sure if you can tell, but it is hanging on the exact same wall. I did not know this when I hung the Ancient this time around, and told me about it later. And I thought it was just a really interesting fact and something fun to share, because apparently this is the wall where this piece belongs in this museum. So here is the piece in its entirety, a little bit of a closer look up at it. And now I'm going to give you a little bit of background about Anne herself. So Anne's work is heavily influenced by the natural world. This participation with the natural world began in childhood, in the pocket woods behind her Ohio home. The woods became her playground and were a place of comfort, wonder, and discovery. In her graduate thesis, she writes, "As a child, nature was the 5-acre woods and creek behind my parents' home. I remember vividly my delight as a child with the changes in light, line, and color as the seasons changed. The woods felt vast and eternal. It became my refuge and a place of solace. The family moved, but there was always a new earthly playground. The natural world began as her subject matter and inspiration, later became her teacher and content, and finally her collaborator. For those of you familiar with her work, you know that paper is her preferred surface, and she uses a wide range of materials. While at Edgecliff College, a small liberal arts college in Cincinnati, Anne was asked to declare a major her junior year. Painting was the traditional path to a degree in art in the 1970s, but she chose drawing instead. She liked the immediacy of drawing, the paper surface and its versatility, and the many material options that include pastels, charcoal, ink, watercolor, and of course, graphite. Humans draw before they learn to speak. And in college, drawing felt like an easier path to her intuition and her heart. She completed her BA in 1975. She received her MFA, also in drawing, in 1989 from the University of Cincinnati, where she was awarded the Graduate Student of the Year. She taught drawing and figure drawing classes for the university after graduation until she moved to California in 1991 to take a full-time teaching position in drawing at Fresno City College. She directed the drawing program there for 24 years. And now I will turn it over to Anne.
Thank you, Sarah. I wanted to thank the museum for their innovative response to pandemic restrictions and coming up with virtual studio tours, and for the opportunity to share my studio with all of you. Thank you, Michelle Ellis-Prassy and Sarah, for your help, and Susan for yours in this process. It's been wonderful. There's two more things before I share my screen. The first one, in putting together my talk today, I realized that I work alone in the studio, but I'm not isolated. I am a part of a vibrant, friendly, supportive art community, and I have thrived here for 35 years, something like that. 30, I think 30 years. I'm not doing math well right now. But Fresno has a unique and very sweet, supportive art community, and I have benefited from it. So thank you. And would you, before I start, notice behind me is a drawing. Two drawings, actually. The long, skinny one, the big one, is 10 feet. There's the top of it, and the bottom of it goes it doesn't even, the whole thing doesn't display on that wall. I'm showing you that, and the drawing next to it is 14 inches tall. The presentation program that I use, PowerPoint and Zoom, reduce everything to fit into the screen, which is 9 inches tall. So that 10-foot drawing is going to be 9 inches, and that 12-inch drawing will be 9 inches. So just so that you know, there's a scale distortion to this presentation. Everything that looks like a postage stamp is big, and everything that looks like, oh, I can see the detail, is probably pretty small. So that's my lesson in scale. Let me share my screen. Okay. So thank you for coming. I'm so happy you're here. I thought I'd start with how I begin my day. This is the door at the back of the house that I walk out of. This is my transition. I walk out the door and through the garden. It feels ideal that my studio, you're looking at it across the way, is not in the house, but it's close to the house. And I get this tranquil walk prior to entering the studio. So let's take a look. This is my permanent studio. It's a drawing studio. As Sarah said, in this case, drawing refers to works on paper. The studio is about 490 square feet. When I moved into this house with Ken, I said I needed a studio, and he said, well, we could remodel the 1.5 car garage. And I said, that sounds perfect. So that's what we did. Obviously added light for me skylights. Storage contents are pretty simple. I should say studio contents are pretty simple. Storage, working areas, supplies, and light. Let's look a little more closely since we kind of moved through the studio quickly. So this is flat files that stores drawings that are finished and in progress, smallish drawings, and store paper. This is overhead storage. Getting things out of the way, there's more storage in the house, but that great big frame holds large drawings, 8 feet and larger, that I cannot roll, and it gets them out of the way. David Alexander designed that for me. And the wall, the white wall, is a working surface when I work vertically. My trusty red cart, accessible materials and mobile. It's full of the media that I use most frequently. So dry material includes charcoal powder, vine charcoal, graphite, lithographic crayon, pastel, oil pastel, wet material, inks, liquid acrylic, tempera, and other things. You can see tapes and some brushes and more storage. More storage. The challenge is to get stuff that I need out of the way and not obstruct flow of things. Library and sketchbook area. Working surfaces for the last 5 years or so have been flat. And I have 2 working surfaces. I'm working on a table here, which is 4 by 4 feet. With the wings up, it's 8 feet by 4 feet. And I'm working flat because I'm working with powdered charcoal or I'm working with wet media. This is my other working surface, which is the floor. It's nice and big, 17 feet by 28 feet. And I'm squeegeeing vine charcoal. Excuse me, I'm squeegeeing powdered charcoal for a river piece that you'll see later in the presentation. I don't use brushes very often. I do use them, but not very often. But usually I pour, spray, blot, squeegee, and tip the surface of my paper. Drawing is portable. So I have lots of portable studios. I can draw on the sofa in living room. I can draw in the car. All I need is a sketchbook in my pocket and a pen, and I've got a studio. Or I can be foreign places, drawing with Michelangelo's David. Or I can be in remote places, up in the mountains. The video was taken by Hazel Hoffman. Thank you, Hazel. Sketchbooks. I am a student of the creative process. Let me explain that a little bit. My first experience with the creative process was in high school. Was doing a class project, and it's kind of hard to talk about because it all just sort of flowed out of me and felt like I almost didn't do it. At my teacher's, and when I was finished, I was really pleased with it. My teacher encouraged me to put it in the high school art show, and it won some sort of award. So that was my first red flag that I needed to pay attention to this creative process thing and intuition. Sketchbooks, as you see here, are a place that I store ideas, documentation, plans, questions, inspiration, collections, my process for later use. And the big sketchbooks that I have stay in the studio, like this one. So this is one that I'm using currently, and here's a few pages, what it looks like, my scribbles and writings. So let me give you an example of how the creative process works. So as an artist and who's a student of this process, I'm always paying attention. So I have eyes to get me through the world, but there's like another awareness. I'm always scanning and noticing the world around me, and it tweaks me when something is noteworthy for the creative process. For example, one day I'm reading the newspaper, this was years ago, and two words did that little tweak thing. The words were "the listener." So I finished reading the article and I went back to check on those two words. And they did it again, which told me I needed to pay attention to it. So I took those two words, probably wrote them in my sketchbook, but when I had time, I began to work with those words and what they felt like and what medium and what subject did I want. And a small group of work came out of that experience. This is one of the pieces called "The Listener" from that piece, from that tweak. And this is another piece that was inspired by those two words. So let's go back to this piece and start here now with a look at this series and some subsequent series. As Sarah said, this work is from the Witness series, and it is, the whole series is a requiem. It's about loss. And I'm going to come back to this piece because it's the last piece in the series, and it's different than the rest of the series. So it's a requiem. In 2003, 4, 5, and 6, you might have noticed if you were driving out of town that there were so many farmers who were ripping out orchards. And the local farmers encountered, for the first time, international markets. And so local people were wanting plums from Brazil and not the local plums. And farmers had to respond if they were going to survive. And I can't tell you how many orchards I sat in where the trees are in bloom and they've been bulldozed. So this whole series are observational, mostly. I'm sitting in the fields drawing. They're not representational, they're a visual resource. And they connect me to the feeling part of the work. So let me go back to the ancient. This piece was different because it was inspired by a photograph. That year, 2006, Trude McDermott at Gallery 25 put together an exhibition called Lamentations. She asked me to participate, and Suzanne French was also in the exhibit, a sculptor, ceramicist, lives in Merced. And Suzanne gave me a photograph of a kiln at night, an Anagama kiln, which is a wood-fired kiln. And the photograph was mesmerizing. And I knew that in that photograph was a piece, something for me to work with. And I didn't want to copy the photograph, so I had to figure out how to extract the inspiration that was in there. And with working with materials and sizes and what imagery I kind of construed was there, this is the piece that happened as a result of that photograph and the inspiration from Suzanne French. my drawing teachers. So the actual teachers, high school teacher Elizabeth Kopp, Ann Biersdorfer, my college professor, and Diane Olivier, graduate professor. Interestingly enough, all women, and early historic drawing teachers whose drawings I looked at often and loved, are all men. Okay, so when I finish a series, like when I finished the Witness series, my focus is really narrow. And the work then is to expand and open up the process again. Our brains are designed to find solutions, to be creative, to be innovative. So how do you expand? So the way I expand is I get really playful, experimental, I'm open, I make messes, I let go of wanting results, I give it time, I try to be positive, I try not to think too much. The expansion process is messy, sometimes very frustrating, and I often feel lost and confused, but it works. So after I finished The Witness, out of desperation, I started cutting up my drawings as a part of what I call my jungle studio. The first drawing from that new series, the series is called the Earth Body series, is this one. The landscape part of this drawing was done in Canyon de Chelly in the Southwest, and I actually cut up the drawings, glued them randomly to a piece of paper, and then added the figure. So the change, the combining of the landscape and the human form now gives me the opportunity to talk about more than just observation, but rather the nature of reality, that life forms are all interconnected, that man and earth are intimately united and together. As Sarah said early on, my subject matter is the natural world. I think I drew a car in 1976, I think. No, I'm pretty sure I did. That was enough, and you're not going to see that. So we're going to continue on with the natural world and this Earth Body series that investigate now the nature of reality. All of these pieces, the landscape part was done from a very specific location, a place that I loved and resonated with. This is from the San Joaquin River. This one is up in the foothills in Lewis Creek. And this little postage stamp, which is a 10-foot drawing, was done up at Willow Creek. Collage is not new. I certainly didn't invent it. And these are surrealist collages, early 20th century surrealist collages. The surrealists used collage and drawing for its mutability. It was changeable. It was fast and it wasn't expensive. I use it for many of the same reasons. They used it and their intention was to disturb. Their intention was to disrupt the art establishment. These don't look radical now, but they were radical in their days. I am indebted to the surrealists and their collages, but my sensibilities move more towards the artists of Gee's Bend. These are two quilts. The one on the left, I think you can see her name, by Jessie T. Pettyway, and the one on the right by Lucy Mooney. These quilts were made from work clothes. The one on the left, 1950, the one on the right, 1935. I share their sensibilities. What attracts me is the tactile quality. You can't see it in these images, but stitching, small little white stitching up and down each of these fairly large quilts. The personal history that's in them, the feeling, the abstraction. I resonate with these. So when the Earth Body series didn't die, it ended. I was back to expanding the creative process. And this picture is up in the foothills. That is a piece of paper soaking in a mountain stream. It's a 9-foot sheet of paper. That's me in the shadows mixing ink. I found this method accidentally while I was in my jungle studio. So I was up in the mountains working, and my paper fell in the water, not on purpose. And of course, I was really upset about it because it ruins the paper. And then I thought, well, okay, what can I do with wet paper? And so I started messing around and trying different things. And by the time I got back to the studio, what I had done once it had dried was pretty interesting. So the process is this. I soak the paper, take it out of the water, throw ink on it, kind of randomly, and I will have collected some elements of nature from the surrounding landscape. Leaves, pine needles, acorns, sticks. And once I have the ink on the paper, I piece it together, carry it about 1/4 of a mile to my car, which has plastic laying in the hatch. Lay the paper down and open up the paper and throw in all this forest debris, close the paper on top, wrap it in plastic, and I drive back to the studio. The drive takes about 50 minutes. And during that time, nature and water kind of start doing their thing. I get home, bring it into the studio, and the paper is pretty warped and wobbly. Take all of the nature stuff off of it, and I stretch it on a wooden frame. And the surfaces that are created are dynamic, to say the least, and nature now becomes not only my subject, but becomes a participant. So this is a piece from Water Body. Investigation of water as an element of life. So all the texture that you see there is a result of the process I just described, and the figure that you see was added. You can see that this is an 8-foot drawing. Here is another one. The textures and surfaces are random, of course. This one got pretty dark, and I thought it might be ruined, but I was nudged intuitively to try, don't you have some oil pastel over there? And finish this one up with white lines. And one more in this series. This is a Waterhouse drawing. The ends of the watercolor paper are triangular like this, and I thought it made a perfect house. So water, home, body. During that time, in my studio is a book by Pat Steer. These are her musings about water. She explores the concept of water in her paintings, using waterfalls as her reference. Again, the element of chance participates here, the nature of water. They're so beautiful. She is, the content has to do with Taoism, and that life is like water. Next transition. expanding the creative process. Transparent color is what I'm looking at. Blue is the color that runs through the 3 bodies of work for the next series. Watercolor is the medium. It's a new medium for me, and my good friend Judith Raposo came to my studio weekly for a couple months, and we did watercolor together. Judith is an artist, she's a vocalist, and she knows how to do watercolor. So I learned by making lots of messes and by watching Judith and her generous spirit sharing with me about watercolor. So the title of the series is Blue for the Pilgrim. Because I was so new at this, I picked a subject matter that was enjoyable for me and easy, which was flowers. Papers varied, and I did use a little bit of brush here, but the colors are blotted. Nina, you're here, and this is Nina's drawing. This is this piece and the next 2 are done on handmade Japanese paper. And this is the River series. That's because of the blue. It's still contained within this larger themed show. And here the blue is water, life, the river of life. The title of this came from the weatherman, Atmospheric Rivers. It stirred my imagination. And the flowers are on the ground here. Collages were a piece of this, for the 3rd series in this Blue Pilgrim show. Eight inches tall. Agnes Pelton, I'm sorry the labels didn't show here. Another artist I'm looking at and admiring while I was working on the Blue for the Pilgrim show. She's called a desert transcendentalist, lived near Palm Springs. Desert and desert light are what inspired her. The one on the left is called Light Center, done in 47. Sandstorm, done in 32, the one on the right. The transparent color is what I resonate with, and of course the landscape. In 2019, Fig Tree Gallery in its December show had a group show that was a collaboration, and each artist worked with a writer or a poet. The show was outstanding. The writers were so generous. I picked Michelle Patton, a local poet, to work with. She was my colleague at Fresno City, and I had recently heard her read her poems and thought we would make a good partnership. We got together and we decided that rivers, or river, would be our subject as well as our content. We visited many rivers during that year, and there are so many amazing rivers in the area. I thought I would share one. Get ready, this is loud. Michelle Patton, throughout the year, was writing poems left and right while I was floundering. Finally, towards the end of the year, things started to come together for me. And this is, you saw me working on this. This is the squeegeed powdered charcoal. That was the first layer for the river piece that I did that went with her poem. You'll see the final piece in a minute. I think the piece of paper is about 8 feet long, maybe 9. So this is the final piece. The piece is called We Had Some Rivers Once, which is the title of Michelle's poem. Her poem is written in white acrylic on acetate, and the poem is then hung from the ceiling. Maybe it's easier to see it from the side. So the poem on the acetate goes through the center of the drawing like a waterfall and then cascades out. The poem is beautiful. And this is the back. Manuel Vasari at the gallery installed and laid out the exhibition and gave it a lot of nice light in the front of the gallery. So 2020, the pandemic restrictions gave me the opportunity to work locally. Instead of soaking paper in the mountain streams, I soaked it in the pool in the driveway that I made, using the same process. So you see me here. I've just lifted the paper out of my improvised pool of water. Throwing ink here randomly. And then I have collected from my front yard and my neighbor's yard leaves, and the yellow shapes there are quince from some bushes close by, and randomly throw them on the inked paper, fold the paper over, wrap it in plastic, and let it sit for 50 minutes. It's not nearly as dramatic as going up to the mountains, but it works. So here is an example of what the paper looks like, or can look like. It varies. Every time it's different, of course. So this would be the first layer. So it's basically ink, water, time, and nature. And this one will be a first layer. This one's, they're so high key. There's such light colored drawing. This one is so sublime. I don't think I could improve on it. So it will stay as it is. Here is another example of that process being integrated into a work as the first layer. I don't have titles for the new work yet. So you're just seeing materials and sizes. Another high key drawing, meaning it's very light colored. This series is called The Garden of Being. And this was inspired by pruning in the front yard. Here's a close-up of the figure, a detail of the figure in that piece. It is watercolor and chalk pastel. Another piece, still cutting things up and reassembling them. This time, geometry is coming into this series, Garden of Being series. At the end of last year, I did a small, it was the first work that came together, a small series of drawings called blue light drawings. And they're irregular shaped formats, very small, and they're all cut up. So it kind of felt like the pandemic in that things are coming back together, feel hopeful and radiant, but not quite sure how it's coming together. These are, as I said, they're small. And I'll show you 3 of them. And the last image is a work in progress. Margaret Lazari did this for her last piece in her presentation for her studio tour, and I thought it was smart. So I'm working on this one. I'm kind of stuck I like where it is, but it's not done. I might have to mess it up a little bit. It's a little bit too neat. So,
Thank you, Anne. This was great.
thank you, Susan.
And we can now open it up to questions, but I do have a few that were sent by email before. So she may have actually answered some of these, and or we just sort of know, but maybe she has additional things to say. So the first question is, what is your favorite medium to work with?
I don't think there is a favorite at this point. Currently, I'm working with transparent color and powdered charcoal, but that could change tomorrow. But I think color might be around for a while.
I hope so. I love your colors. And the next question leads into, if you were to decide to start working with a new medium, what would it be?
Well, I have to go back into my jungle studio for that, and it will be a surprise to me too.
Oh, Anne.
Yes, Sally.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay. Oh, I thought your presentation was just outstanding. It was clear, it was explicit, and your work is just beautiful, Anne. Just beautiful. Beautiful presentation, beautiful work. I loved, especially loved how you dealt with your water in the stream and your big paper and letting nature do its course, and then combining the human body with nature. So combining, in other words, randomness with some control. I just thought it was just beautiful. Just loved this.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Anne. It's just beautiful.
I echo that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate both of your comments.
And I loved being inside your mind and hearing your thoughts, your difficulties, your frustrations, your inspirations, hearing the thoughts of an artist, in other words. Thank you.
You're welcome. You know, it's so interesting with the opportunity to share a studio virtually. It opens up other possibilities. And thank you, Fresno Art Museum and Michelle and Sarah and Susan for making this possible. And I mean, putting the presentation together, I was sharing with them, I learned things that were exciting and new for me about my own process that will be helpful. So, and Steve and Sally, a part of my artistic community here that have benefited me, their presence for all the years I've been here.
Thank you.
Anne, can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry to jump in. Is that okay? It's Stephanie. I don't know if you can see me. So the last pieces, well, the change into color I thought was really, really interesting. And anyway, I'm interested to see where that will go, you know, where you take it. But the other question I had was, in the last piece, it almost looked like you had cyanotypes in the pieces. And I'm wondering, have you thought about cyanotypes as another layer?
No, I haven't. You're right. That color is like them, isn't it?
Cyanotype color.
It is.
Did you see it? Yeah.
And the nature, the leaves, the way you could use nature. Anyway, I just immediately thought, oh, she's using cyanotypes. And then you said that's watercolor. And I thought, oh, I'm surprised. So anyway, I just wanted to ask you that.
Okay, Stephanie. So you and I have to have a date. We can talk about this, and you'll have to help me figure that one out. But that sounds like a really good idea. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I would be happy to anytime. It's what I'm doing now. So I'm having fun with it. So love to.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Anne, it's been an absolute wonderful experience to hear you talk about how you're a student of your creativity, and to see you and Steve in this, and to come full circle in my journey like this is so beautiful. And I just want to thank you so much. I really hope to further conversations with you about that practice that you so wonderfully talked about, how you've integrated into your life. And the most beautiful thing to me was that you're still making art driving back from the creek, right? You're still making art.
Yeah.
We're not just in our heads, but you're in action, even still while you're driving. And that, like, wow, I'm sitting there taking notes. Okay, art practice 101 for me now, right there. And so you lit fire in me again, and it's just really amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. I appreciate your comments and your photography work, which always inspires me to keep working. So it's mutual.
I have a question, Anne.
Yes.
You have focused mostly on your process, and I loved your presentation. I just loved it. So wonderful and inspiring for another artist too. I mean, I feel like running into my studio and doing something now. But in just focusing on the product, not so much the process, I'm not sure that you do this, but we as viewers, of course, do that. And I'm looking at, for example, the imagery, say from 2004, 2005, the ruined trees, and the intensity of that is so riveting. And then moving into the later work, especially when you get to the Blue for the Pilgrim series, it seems much gentler and more flowing somehow. And I wonder, do you recognize a change in the intensity there? And how do you feel about that? If you ever view the product itself?
Yeah. That's a good question, Marilyn. It speaks to one of the ways I have to be careful. I can get caught thinking too much. You know, if I go back and look at work and go, oh boy, isn't that nice? Can I do that again? I try not to think too much that way or go there. I'm glad you noticed it. But what's behind me, I just leave it there and move forward. And if the Blue for the Pilgrim feels more gentle, then it is. And we'll see if the responsive, strong, powerful, broken, violent ever comes out again. It might. Thank you for the question, Marilyn, though.
Thank you for the answer.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions? I've got a couple more on this email. Oh, let me see if there's something here. Oh, there's just a lot of people thanking you for your presentation in the chat, it looks like. Anne, can I ask you a couple more from this email?
Sure, sure. The questions are from Rosalind Scheid, family in Connecticut. Sister.
And she asked, what is your favorite subject? Now, I don't know whether she means subject like history, art, science, or if she means subject to paint, which I think you have answered that.
I have answered that, I'm sure.
Okay. The other question is it hard to gift or sell your work? Like gift that?
Sometimes in the past it was, not anymore. I'm happy to let go of it. It feels like the sooner I let go of it, then I don't know, it opens up more space inside to create the next work. And sharing, you know, as artists, those of you who are artists know this, and those of you who are performers know this. There's the creative process, there's the execution part, and then there's the giving away part. And for artists, it's exhibitions usually, but it's also letting go of stuff. And at this point, giving it away, selling it, gifting it feels good.
Hey, Ian, this is Bob White.
Hi, Bob.
Hey, how are you? I'm not quite sure how to frame the question, but you spent a lot of your early career teaching and you kind of drawing, did a lot of that. Your late work, yeah, it's the drawing sort of in the background. I mean, it informs it, but I'm kind of curious about the role that plays. And I'm also thinking about how much digital, things have gone digital. If you were back in the classroom today, I mean, what role does drawing really play now in your work? What would you be telling students today?
Oh, good questions, Bob. So do you have about a half hour? That's about how long this will take.
Yeah, sorry.
First of all, it was a gift to be able to teach drawing, to teach what you love.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'd be in the studio and I would go into my classroom, my studio classroom, and I could share what was going on and engage them in what they were doing. It was this beautiful looping circle. And drawing is, it depends on your definition of drawing. And drawing used to mean to me a person who makes marks on a surface. My definition of drawing seems to change regularly. And what is my current definition? Well, the Museum of Modern Art, their definition of drawing is works on paper. I mean, practically speaking, it's a simple way for an institution to deal with drawings. And I presented my drawing studio as a person, an artist who works with paper. So I still draw, but the drawing is, and Bob, I think you would have seen it more in the later work. If you were standing in front of it, there's lots of marks and movements with hand stuff. And I still feel like I'm a person who draws. And digital, absolutely. Andrea, I'm thinking of you, former student who's an illustrator and does all of her drawing digitally. I need some teachers to help me there, and I'm ready and waiting. I think I would miss the mess, but I'm going to leave the question at that point. But I'm open to digital. After I do the blue print stuff with Stephanie, I forgot the name of it, Stephanie. Then I'll start on the digital drawing.
Cyanotype.
Linotype, that's it.
Cyanotype. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question, Bob. It was a good one. We probably have time for one more.
Question, anyone have anything to ask Anne before we say goodbye? Rosalind, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you, Rosalind.
Okay, good. I think my last question there, Susan, was, have you considered coming out to Connecticut to do some of your projects soon?
I love that.
We've got room for you. We can make our shed into a studio too, you know.
Thank you. I think I'll take you up on that, especially since restrictions are starting to lift and there's lots to see in Connecticut, including family.
And Rhode Island. And one thing people on the West Coast don't realize, New England's a very small area, so you can go from state to state pretty quickly. So there's a lot of cool things to see and do.
Yes. Thank you for the invitation and the earlier questions, Rosalind.
Yeah, sure. Love this. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Sarah, do you have some Parting words.
I just wanted to remind everyone to please check out our online gallery guide. Here She Stands, the entire exhibition, including Anne's beautiful piece, is included on the gallery guide, and the link can be found on our website. Additionally, the museum store carries the catalog for Anne's 2016 retrospective exhibition, Bodyland. I was right. I doubted myself. And that is available for purchase in the museum store. That was a 3-part exhibition, and part 1 was at Fresno City College, part 2 at Arte Americas, and then part 3 was hosted at the Fresno Art Museum. So I would also like to take a moment to thank the McClatchy Fresno Arts Endowment of the James B. McClatchy Foundation for their sponsorship of the exhibition and this studio tour. And I know everyone is very anxious to hear news about the museum's opening. We don't have an opening date to announce yet, but it will be coming soon. We are currently installing some new exhibitions for you to see. When we do reopen, Here She Stands will run through January 9th, so you will have plenty of opportunity to visit. And I hope you all enjoyed today's studio tour. And thank you so much, Anne. It's been wonderful working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Anne. That was wonderful.
The
Thanks,
recording
Lena.
should be available within a few weeks. If anyone missed it that you want to send in to watch it. Thank you.
Thank you all.